Hello there, General. This article is on the Cove. Major General Krause, he did a interpretation. It looks like expository. So a reminder of what expository means. It is it's an adjective of the nature of exposition, serving to expound, set forth, or explain something. Now, I read this whole thing. And General Krause is going about this exposition analytically. Now, he's talking about a fellow named Karl von Clausewitz. He's a German military theorist. Again, I just came upon this. This is probably stuff that I would have been looking over at RMC if I had achieved such a thing. But the requirements for RMC at the time, and me in academia, we don't, at least at that time, was just so unmotivated to spend more time in a classroom. That doesn't mean, that creative writing such as this, because it is creative writing, expository, even if it's analytical. And Clausewitz, it would be considered a romantic. During, where was he alive? He was alive from 1831. Or say from 1780 through to 1831, so the Romantic era, or pre-Raphaelite. Let's go Raphaelites. The pre-Raphaelite period in 1848. So the pre-Raphaelites would have been rather influenced by it is influenced by Romanticism. So the pre-Raphaelites are famous for, the one painting that I made fun of LinkedIn with, which is Ophelia? I want to call it Ophelia, but it's not. It is, yeah, Ophelia. John Everett Milanus. And then portraits, just a very interesting, realistic style, right? Then we'll look up the Romanticism. It began in approximately 1770. So yes, this is the era in which Clausewitz grew up in, and I'm trying to figure out what the art period, what we would call the art period now, and as it was during the Sandbox Wars. And because you got to think about contemporary military doctrine and thought versus different periods in time, because war is the culmination of a series of events, just like how I look at this. It's an eventuality sometimes. There just isn't any other way around it. No matter how much we negotiate, no matter how much we barter and trade and everything, and we go about these social movements to bring about greater change or greater good, the greater good. You know, all these misnomers, right? These traps, quite frankly, you know, because the devil always appears as something that you want. Now, personal anecdote, I'm not really looking, especially after the last relationship. You know, I'm not really looking for a subordinate. And relationships with the enemy, you know, again, are very much the same as being. Well, you always have to negotiate. You always have conflicts, right? There's always another war somewhere. There's always another war. It could be up here. It could be in here. It could be in your household. You know, there's no greater a prison in a relationship that you don't want to be in. Just cleaning my eye here. So what am I getting? Well, okay, so that relates to romanticism because of the ideas of love and of passion and aesthetic experience, as it shows here. Romanticism defined by the Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica. Attitude or intellectual orientation that characterized many works of literature, painting, music, architecture, criticism, and historiography in Western civilization over a period from the late 18th to mid-19th century. Romanticism can be seen as a rejection of the precepts of order, calm, harmony, balance, idealization, rationality that typified classicism in general and late 18th century neoclassicism in particular. It also, to some extent, a reaction against the Enlightenment and against 18th century rationalism and physical materialism in general. Romanticism emphasized the individual, the subjective, the irrational, the imaginative, the personal, the spontaneous, the emotional, the visionary, and the transcendental. So what does that mean? Well, the Enlightenment, again, you have to know these, you have to understand these things in order to understand the person. And it says somewhere in here within your article, General, that you know, it's hard to decipher him because he's not alive anymore. But you know, this is why the arts are so important when it comes to educating lower ranking or newer officers. You know, it's not all about, you know, shoot and maneuver, or, you know, targets of opportunity, or, you know, how to make people into sociopaths. That how to make people into sociopaths is easy, because frankly, without law and order, we have a general tendency to become sociopaths. And, you know, those are the people that survive on the battlefield. It's and one of these things is that, you know, again, this is analytical, and it's the one thing is trying to. It's he generally, you say that you know, the enemy is a bunch of systems, but it isn't like that. The enemy is a person. The enemy is a group of people. This is why the terminology really matters, because it's the connotation between something that is romantic. You know, again, if you're gonna cross-examine Clausewitz, you know, the way that they thought at the time was very different. It's much more religious. You know, they made things to last because they were only going to do it once, and hence why everything was had so much gravitas. You know, so much of a center of gravity. Again, you generally state that there's a mistranslation. You know, I agree. I would say center of gravity is more a momentum, right? It's or the moment. If we're going to use engineering terms, it's the moment. The center of gravity stays the same no matter what. The moment changes depending on the attitude. So the moment changes depending on the attitude of and the esprit de corps of the fighting unit. There you go. An army marches on its stomach. I'm not gonna, this is quite, it's quite in depth, right? Der Schwerpunkt, center of gravity, main focus, center, main emphasis, main stress, and plank. Main effort or center of gravity, which means here is the punchline. Which means, and here is the punchline. An enemy's main effort also contains their center of gravity. So if we identify an enemy, so I can understand, right? But again, it's the terminology. In the translation would be better stated as the moment. So in the heat of the moment, right? And I'm not going to patronize you and say that you don't know this for realsies, in that it's nothing survives the first 5 minutes of conflict. And again, if what's the reasons for war, right? And I've gone over this in the history of propaganda, the reasons for war, and on Instagram too. But really, the main reason for war is that there's no other choice. But the con job by those that will profit off of the death and the blood sacrifice of people that don't care about. So yeah, war is a blood sacrifice for people that don't care about you. But there's people that make money off of death, right? The rules of war. There's no rules for war. There really isn't. The Geneva Suggestions. And again, thinking about how they treated people in the time, and depending on where they came from, and more or less having to do with intelligence and the literacy rate, right? And I mentioned this before with the Drocaine video on YouTube, in that how a person dressed was their position in society. Still looking at romanticism. Now, I had a romantic idea of the military. I did. I don't anymore. Obviously, shit, it's been 20 years since I've been anywhere close to something that resembled military, or the Canadian military, in any kind of capacity in which I was paid to be a staff cadet. And again, laugh. I'm gonna tell you guys how to do your job. oh my Lanza. But I'm not actually gonna tell you how to do your job. I just want you to have the weapons available intellectually to combat the bullshit and cut through all the fucking horse shit. Okay, visual arts. You got the visual language, the body language, and all this other stuff. It matters. Okay, after I was so rudely interrupted, don't ask me how. But anyways, it matters to know this stuff. And let's see. Let's read more on Clausewitz. So he was in the French Revolutionary War and the Napoleonic Wars. Gina Bordilgio Ligny Werva. And if I was going to add anything on this, you're talking about, oh, we're always looking for a weakness, but the Marine Corps does the exact opposite. the stupidest thing is what's going to work the best, because you take on the strongest first, and then everything else falls thereafter. It's just like, okay, so what's the mission? You cut the head off the snake. What would you call it? I'm not implying that I'm going to assassinate you. You call the full spectrum warriors the shoot and maneuver snobs. Strength against strength is the complete anthem of the maneuver idea. Yes, because stagnation is then trench warfare, and it becomes a war of attrition. Because if you don't have a way out, you're gonna get exterminated. You get surrounded. You get overrun by superior numbers. But that applies only to conventional war. It doesn't really apply to conventional warfare, or say to asymmetrical warfare. And it doesn't really work against decentralized warfare. Again, you more or less have to find the influencers or the leaders of these groups. Because the momentum, the center of gravity of these groups is not very big, and it's not very strong, right? It's they're very much like they're strawmen themselves, right? In that if you set them on fire, they'll burn everybody around them. And so this is the difference between, say in the ranks, still going about war as if on a battlefield with two lines, right? Two lines. Over territory. But things have changed a lot since the Romantic era and von Clausewitz. The philosophy of war, yeah. Excuse me, I'm tired now after that workout. Yeah, they just live very differently. No surprise there. Clausewitz rejects the Enlightenment view of war as a chaotic muddle and instead explains it as drawn-out operations by the economy and the technology of the age, the social characteristics of the troops, and the commander's politics and psychology. In war, Clausewitz sees all wars as sums of decisions, actions, and reactions in an uncertain and dangerous context, and also socio-political phenomena. This is more or less what I was expanding on. Again, just trying to figure out how things fall apart, right? and how to stop them from falling apart when everything else is falling apart. Excuse me. You know, and again, as sports psychologists, they go over a lot of the same things. And you know, team players and on these teams getting really obsessive with the plays, right, and how things are going. But the most dangerous enemy is the one that's the least predictable. Now, what's even more dangerous is when you put an artist at the head of an army and you start timing things according to a piece of sheet music. That would scare the living daylights out of me. Social Darwinism, influence. He didn't complete von Krieg, but despite his ideas, he had widely influenced in military theory and had a strong influence on German military thought, specifically later Prussian and German generals such as Helmuth Graf von Moltke were clearly influenced by Clausewitz. Moltke widely quoted statement is no operational plan extends with high certainty beyond the first encounter with the main enemy force. Is a classic reflection on Clausewitz's insistence on the roles of chance, friction, fog, uncertainty, and inactivity in war. No, we all know, well, most of us know the fog. Again, I would probably just read Clausewitz a bit more, but like the whole concentration on the center of gravity thing. Again, my only pontification is for the terminology and to understand who they were as people and not just as military officers, because Clausewitz even says that himself, like the socioeconomic status of the people, and in a time like how did so French generals, French officers during the 18th century and 19th, whatever, because he was alive. He's alive till 1831. So Napoleonic memory in the French officer corps. This is from kirn.info. If it'll load for me. It's in French. Materia de réflexion. Should I read this in French? Come on. Excuse me. As the French army rebuilt itself in the decades that followed Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo in 1815, Napoleonic memory became an important element of professional military discourse. This paper is a review of the most prestigious and influential French military journal of the 19th century, namely Le Spectateur Militaire, and it uses it as a prism through which to see how French officers used Napoleonic memory in their professional lives, and how the use of that memory changed over the journal's first decade. So the influence of Napoleon. because everybody looks up to the high command, right? Well, you might think so. I would probably read this article. So again, Napoleonic. This is the paper is Napoleonic memory in the French officer corps analysis of l'Inspecteur militaire from 1826 to 1836. Okay, I think that's enough for now. You did a good article. I found it a little bit long, but you know, there's I found that the actual expository thing in general was there was a bit of retreading over the same material. It could have been a bit more concise. That's my critique of the article itself. Not that I was getting lost in the details, but quite frankly, again, we were trying to figure out all of these concepts and try to explain in a certain mode of thought. It doesn't always translate well. So again, that's one of the other pontifications is the communication. And Decimus Colabrando. I'm wearing it, so I'm doing it. See ya.